You know how it is when you buy a new place. You tell yourself you're going to be smart about it. You're going to save up for nice furniture, do the place right, but then you move in and the living room is just an empty box with echoes, and your wife starts giving you that look every time you eat dinner on a cardboard box. So when I saw the sign for a yard sale just 3 streets over, I figured why not? It was a Saturday morning in October. The leaves were starting to turn, but it was still warm enough for just a flannel shirt. The house was an old colonial, white paint chipping off the shutters. The yard sale was set up on a big tarp on the front lawn. There was the usual stuff: old golf clubs, a toaster that looked older than me, some kids' toys. An older woman was sitting in a folding chair by the garage. She had that look, like she was selling off the life she'd lived for the last 40 years. I wasn't really looking for anything until I saw it. Tucked back near the garage door was a rocking chair. It was made of dark wood, oak maybe, with a high back and these armrests that were worn smooth. It wasn't fancy, no carvings or anything, but it looked solid, built to last. I walked over and ran my hand along the armrest. It felt warm, even though it was sitting in the shade. "How much for the rocker?" I asked. The woman looked at it, then at me. Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes went flat. $20, she said. I figured she'd start higher. $20 for a solid wood rocking chair was a steal. I pulled out my wallet and handed her the cash. As I was picking it up, I noticed a small dark stain on the side of the seat. It was old, whatever it was. Coffee, probably. "My husband used to sit in that chair," she said. I was already turning to carry it to my truck. "Every evening, right up until he passed." I stopped. "I'm sorry to hear that." She just nodded, folding her arms. "He loved that chair, wouldn't let anyone else sit in it." I thanked her and loaded it up. I didn't think much about it. You buy used stuff, it comes with a history. It is what it is. I brought it home, set it in the corner of the living room, and stood back. My wife, Sarah, came in from the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You bought a rocking chair?" she asked. $20, solid wood." She walked over and sat down in it. She gave it a little rock. "It's comfortable," she said. "A little creepy, though. Who'd you buy it from?" "Old lady a few streets over. Her husband died." "Ah," Sarah said, standing up. "So it's haunted." I laughed. "It's a chair, babe." For the first few weeks, nothing happened. I'd come home from work, throw my jacket over the arm of it, sit on the couch and watch TV. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear a little creak from the living room. Old house settling. That's what I told myself. But then, things started moving. It was small stuff at first. The remote would be on the coffee table when I went to bed, but in the morning, it would be on the floor by the rocking chair. I figured I was just tired, knocking things over when I got up to pee in the middle of the night. Then one night, I came home from a late shift. Sarah was already asleep. I walked into the living room to grab my laptop off the couch, and I froze. The rocking chair was moving. It wasn't a big, dramatic swing. It was just a slow, gentle rock, like someone was sitting in it, pushing off just a little with their toes. I stood there in the dark, staring at it. The chain on the ceiling fan was tapping against the glass light cover. That was the only sound. The chair rocked back, then forward, then back. I told myself it was the floor. The house was old, settling. The floorboards were uneven. I walked over and put my hand on the back of it. It stopped. I pushed down on it, hard, and it just sat there, normal. I went to bed and didn't tell Sarah. A week later, I was lying in bed, almost asleep, when I heard it. A voice, low, mumbled, coming from the living room. I laid there with my eyes open, listening. It wasn't the TV. It wasn't Sarah talking in her sleep. It was a man's voice. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of it, like someone talking to themselves. I got up. I walked down the hallway. The living room was dark, except for the street light coming through the blinds. The rocking chair was still. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Nothing happened. I finally went back to bed. The next evening, Sarah was in the living room folding laundry. She had it piled on the couch. I sat down in the rocking chair to take off my boots. As soon as I sat down, I felt it, a vibration, like a low hum going right up through my spine. And then the chair stopped. It wouldn't move. I pushed with my feet, and it was like the rockers were glued to the floor. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. "Nothing," I said. I pushed harder. The chair didn't move. I stood up. As soon as I was out of it, I heard a sound, a crack. I looked down at the wooden floor. A long, thin crack was running from one of the rockers out toward the middle of the room. I pointed at it. "See that? That's why it's sticking. The floor is warped." Sarah looked at the crack, then at the chair. "That crack wasn't there yesterday." "Well, it's there now." But I didn't sit in that chair again after that. Neither did Sarah. It just sat in the corner. But things kept happening. I'd wake up and find the front door unlocked. I'd go out to my truck in the morning and find the driver's seat pushed all the way back like someone taller than me had been sitting there. I changed the locks. It kept happening. One night, I was working late in the spare bedroom we were using as an office. I heard Sarah scream. I ran out into the living room. She was standing by the kitchen doorway, her hand over her mouth. She pointed at the rocking chair. It was rocking so hard it was shaking. The front rockers were lifting off the floor a couple inches, slamming back down. I could see the crack in the floorboards getting bigger, splintering. "Get out," I said. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the front door. We stood on the front porch. Through the window, I could see the chair still rocking. Then, it stopped. "I'm calling the cops," Sarah said. "And tell them what? A chair is rocking?" We didn't go back inside. We drove to a diner and sat there for 2 hours, not talking much. When we got back, the chair was still. I pushed it against the wall, facing the wall. I put it in timeout, like a kid. The next morning, I was making coffee. Sarah was still in bed. I walked into the living room and stopped. The chair was facing the hallway that led to our bedroom. I grabbed it. I dragged it across the floor, out the front door, and down the steps. I put it on the curb. I took a picture of it and posted it on a local Facebook group. "Free rocking chair, curb alert, come get it." I went back inside, locked the door, and went to work. When I came home, the chair was gone. I figured someone took it. I felt relieved. I went inside, kicked off my shoes, and walked into the living room. It was there, back in the corner, facing the hallway. I called Sarah. She was still at work. "Did you bring the chair back in?" I asked. "What chair? No." I hung up. I stood there looking at it. There were no tracks in the grass. The front door was still locked. I grabbed it again. This time, I didn't put it on the curb. I put it in the back of my truck. I drove it to a storage unit I rented on the other side of town. I put it inside, locked the unit, and drove home. That night, I slept on the couch. I wanted to be in the living room. I wanted to see if anything happened.
Nothing did. The chair was gone. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. I thought Sarah was up early. I sat up on the couch. The smell was coming from the kitchen. I walked in. There was a mug of coffee on the counter, steam coming off it, fresh. And next to it, sitting on one of our kitchen stools, was a man's leather wallet. I opened it. Inside was a driver's license with a man's name. The address was the house where I bought the rocking chair. The expiration date was 5 years ago. I heard the front door open. I walked back into the living room. The front door was wide open. Standing in the doorway was the old woman, the one who sold me the chair. She wasn't wearing a coat, even though it was cold. She looked at me. Her eyes weren't sad anymore. They were empty. "My husband," she said, her voice quiet. "He didn't pass. He disappeared 6 years ago. The police never found him." She looked past me into the living room, at the empty corner where the chair used to be. "He loved that chair. He wouldn't let anyone else sit in it." She turned and walked back down the steps. I stood in the doorway watching her go. When she got to the sidewalk, she stopped. She turned around and looked at me one more time. "He found you," she said. I closed the door. I locked it. I went back to the kitchen. The coffee mug was still there. The wallet was still there. I picked up the wallet and looked at the man's face on the license. Just a normal-looking guy. Brown hair, brown eyes. I haven't been back to the storage unit. I pay the bill every month, but I don't go there. The chair is still in there. At least, I hope it is. Because lately, I've been finding the back door unlocked when I come home. I'll find the couch cushions pushed in like someone was sitting there. And sometimes, late at night, I'll hear a creak on the porch, a slow, steady rhythm, like a rocking chair rocking on the wooden boards. I don't look out the window anymore when it happens. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to stop. It always does, eventually. But last night, I heard something new. A voice, low, mumbled, right outside the bedroom window. This time, I made out one word, clear as day. Mine.
We bought the house in May. It was a split level in a development built in the 70s. You know the type. All the houses look the same, brown siding, carport, a little hill in the front yard that's a nightmare to mow. But it was in our price range, and the inspection came back clean. That was the main thing. The previous owner was an old guy named Mr. Dable. He lived there since the place was built. The real estate agent said he'd passed away in the house, but it was natural causes, peaceful, in his sleep. I didn't think much of it. Old people die. It happens. We moved in over a weekend. My wife, Jenna, wanted to paint everything. The walls were that weird beige color that looks like dirty coffee creamer. So that first week, I was busy with rollers and tape. I was in the garage looking for a paint scraper I thought I'd packed when I found it. It was an old metal toolbox, red with a rusty latch. It was sitting on a shelf in the corner behind some empty planters. I popped the latch and opened it up. It was full of tools, not nice ones, just old, worn stuff. A hammer with a wooden handle that had electrical tape wrapped around it, a set of screwdrivers with the tips all chewed up, a handsaw with rust spots on the blade, a level with the bubble fluid turned yellow, a couple of chisels that looked like they'd been used to pry up flooring, stuff that looked like it belonged to a guy who fixed things just enough to keep them from breaking all the way. I figured the old man's family had cleaned out the house, but missed this. I asked Jenna about it. "Should we keep it?" I said. "It's just old junk." She looked at the tools. "We could use a hammer. Ours broke last month, remember?" She was right. We didn't have much in terms of tools. I was the kind of guy who called a handyman for most things. So I put the toolbox on my workbench in the garage. I figured I'd go through it later, keep what was useful.
That night, I was in the living room watching a game. Jenna was already in bed. I heard a noise from the garage. It was a loud bang, like something metal hitting concrete. I went out to check. The garage door was still closed. The car was inside. Everything looked normal. I walked over to the workbench. The toolbox was closed. The latch was fastened. I opened it. All the tools were inside, just like before. I shrugged and went back inside. The next day, I was at work. Jenna called me around 2 in the afternoon. "Did you come home for lunch?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm at the office." "Someone was in the garage," she said. Her voice was shaky. "The door from the garage to the kitchen was unlocked. I always keep it locked." "Maybe you forgot to lock it," I said. "I didn't, and the toolbox was open on the floor. All the tools were laid out on the concrete." I told her to lock the doors and I'd be home early. When I got there, I checked the garage. The toolbox was back on the workbench. The tools were inside. The latch was closed. I checked the door that led outside. It was locked from the inside. The only way in was through the kitchen door or the carport door. Both were locked. I figured maybe she was distressed from the move. I didn't say anything else about it. A couple days later, I decided to use the hammer to hang a picture in the hallway. I went to the garage, opened the toolbox, and grabbed the hammer. The handle felt strange in my hand. It was sticky. I looked at the electrical tape. It was wrapped tight, but underneath it felt damp. I didn't think much of it. I hung the picture and put the hammer back. That night, I woke up to a sound. It was a steady tapping. Tap, 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 coming from the hallway. I got up and walked out. The hallway was dark. The tapping stopped. I stood there for a minute. Nothing. I went back to bed.
The next morning, I saw it. On the wall, right where I'd hung the picture, there was a small dent in the drywall, about the size of a hammerhead, right next to the nail I'd used. I took the hammer out of the toolbox that day. I put it in the trash can outside. I wasn't going to use it again. But the tapping didn't stop. It started happening every night. Tap, tap, tap. Always in the hallway, always around 2 in the morning. I'd get up, walk out, and it would stop. One night, I waited in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark. I wanted to catch whatever it was. At 2 in the morning, I heard it, but it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from the garage. I walked to the door and opened it. The garage was dark. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb was out. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The toolbox was on the floor. The lid was open. The tools were gone. I shined the light around the garage. The hammer was on the floor near the car. The screwdrivers were scattered on the workbench. The handsaw was leaning against the wall. But the chisels, I didn't see the chisels anywhere. I turned around to go back inside, and that's when I saw them. The chisels were stuck in the door from the garage to the kitchen. One chisel was driven right through the wood just above the doorknob. The other was stuck in the frame, like someone had slammed it in there to wedge the door shut. I grabbed the chisels and pulled them out. The door swung open. I ran inside and locked it behind me. I woke Jenna up and told her we needed to leave. We spent the night at a motel. The next day, I called a locksmith. I had him change all the locks. I also had him put a deadbolt on the garage door. While he was working, I took the toolbox and all the tools and threw them in a dumpster behind a shopping center a few miles away. That night, we went back home. Everything was quiet. No tapping, no banging. I thought it was over. 3 days later, I came home from work. Jenna was sitting in the kitchen. She was pale. She pointed at the table. The hammer was sitting on the kitchen table, the one I'd thrown in the trash. It was clean, no rust. The electrical tape was new, and next to it was a note, handwritten on a piece of brown paper. "You didn't fix it right." I didn't recognize the handwriting. I called the police. They came and took the hammer and the note. They dusted for prints. They found nothing. They said maybe someone was playing a prank. They told me to get a security camera.
I bought 3 cameras. I put one on the front porch, one on the back porch, and one in the garage. That night, I sat in the living room and watched the feed on my phone. At 1:47 a.m., the garage camera went dark. Not static, just black. The other cameras were fine. At 1:55 a.m., the feed came back. The garage was empty. The car was there. Nothing else. I went out the next morning. The deadbolt on the garage door was unlocked. I hadn't unlocked it. I checked the camera footage. The blackout lasted 8 minutes. When the picture came back, the garage door was still closed. The deadbolt was still locked in the footage, but I was looking at it right then, and it was unlocked. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to the bed. A week went by. Nothing happened. I started to relax. I told Jenna maybe the cops were right. Maybe it was just some stupid prank from a neighbor kid. She didn't believe me, but she stopped checking the locks every 5 minutes.
Then I came home one day and found the toolbox. It was on the front porch, right in front of the door, the same red metal toolbox. The latch was closed. I looked at the camera footage. The camera showed the porch empty at 2:14 p.m. At 2:15 p.m., the footage glitched. A burst of static. When it cleared, the toolbox was sitting there. I didn't open it. I picked it up and drove to the river. I threw it off the bridge. I watched it sink. That night, I was in bed. Jenna was asleep next to me. I heard a noise. Not tapping, something else. A scraping sound coming from under the house. Our bedroom was on the ground floor, right over the crawl space. The scraping was slow, methodical, like someone dragging something heavy across the dirt. I got out of bed. I walked to the back door. I stepped out onto the patio. The crawl space access was a little wooden door near the ground. It was closed. The scraping sound was louder out there. I knelt down and put my ear to the door. Inside, I heard breathing, heavy, slow, and then a voice, old, raspy. Gotta fix it. Gotta fix it right. I ran back inside. I woke Jenna up. We packed a bag and drove to her mom's house. We stayed there for 3 days. On the 3rd day, I went back by myself. I wasn't going to let some old man's ghost run me out of my own house. I went to the garage. I opened the door. Everything was normal. The car was there. The workbench was clear. I walked to the crawl space access in the back. The little wooden door was open. It was swinging slowly, like something had just gone through it. I got a flashlight and shined it into the crawl space. There was a space carved out under the living room. The dirt was packed down hard. And in the middle of that space, sitting on the dirt, was the toolbox. The lid was open. The tools were laid out around it in a circle. Hammer, screwdrivers, handsaw, level, chisels. And next to the toolbox was a sleeping bag, an old green sleeping bag, unzipped. Inside it was a pile of clothes, work pants, a flannel shirt, work boots, all covered in dirt, all stained with something dark. I called the cops again. They came out. They crawled under the house. They found the toolbox and the sleeping bag. They found something else, too. Behind the toolbox, carved into the dirt wall, was a hole about the size of a man's fist. And inside the hole was a plastic bag. Inside the bag was a wallet, a watch, and a set of keys. The wallet had an ID. It belonged to a man who'd been reported missing 6 months before we bought the house. His name was not Mr. Gable. The cops told me that Mr. Gable had died in the house, like the real estate agent said. But before he died, he'd hired a handyman to do some work. The handyman never left. They found the handyman's truck 2 towns over. They found a receipt in the glove box for a red metal toolbox, purchased the same week Mr. Gable died. They never found the handyman, but they found traces, blood under the crawl space, hair in the sleeping bag, and on the back of the chisels under the rust they found residue. The lab said it was bone dust. I sold the house 6 months later, took a loss on it. I didn't care. We moved to an apartment on the 3rd floor. No garage, no crawl space, no yard. But sometimes when I'm sitting on the couch at night, I still hear it. A faint tapping. Tap, tap,
tell myself it's the pipes or the neighbors upstairs, but I know what it really is. It's the sound of a man who wanted to fix things, a man who took it too far, a man who found a way to keep working even after no one was left to pay him. The toolbox is still under that house as far as I know. The cops took it as evidence, but they never found the hammer, the one with the electrical tape, the one I threw in the dumpster. I saw it last week. I was walking through a hardware store looking for a new drill, and there, on a shelf in the clearance section, was a hammer with a wooden handle wrapped in black electrical tape. It looked just like the one I threw away. I didn't touch it. I walked right out of the store and haven't been back since. But it made me wonder, how many garages does that toolbox live in now? How many crawl spaces? How many people wake up at 2 in the morning to the sound of a man who just wants to fix what's broken? If you ever see a red toolbox at a yard sale, keep walking. Don't open it, don't touch it, and for God's sake, don't try to fix anything with it. Because some things aren't meant to be fixed. And some men, they never stop working.
We moved into the new house in July. It was on a county road, about 20 minutes outside town. A ranch-style place with a big backyard that backed up to some woods. My wife, Kim, wanted to be out of the neighborhood, wanted space for the dog. I liked the idea of a workshop. The house had a detached garage with room for tools and projects. It was a fixer-upper, but nothing major. We got it for a good price. The previous owners had already moved out. They left the place clean, but the garage was a mess. Old paint cans, broken flower pots, stuff like that. I spent the first weekend hauling it all to the dump. On Sunday, I was putting gas cans on a high shelf when I noticed a yard sale sign down the road. It was a handwritten sign just taped to a mailbox, yard sale with an arrow. I figured I'd take a look. I walked down the road, maybe a quarter mile. The house was an old farmhouse, white with a wraparound porch. The yard was overgrown. There was a table set up in the driveway with some stuff on it, old records, some kitchenware, a few tools. A man was sitting on the porch steps. He was in his 60s maybe, with a gray beard and a flannel shirt. He didn't say anything when I walked up. I looked at the table, nothing I needed. But then I saw it. Sitting on the ground next to the table was a wooden chest. It was about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, maybe 1.5 feet tall. Dark wood with iron straps and a latch. It looked old, not antique store old, just old like it had been sitting in someone's attic for a long time. "How much for the chest?" I asked. The man looked at me. He had pale blue eyes. "50." I opened the lid. Inside was nothing, just bare wood. The hinges were solid. The wood was a little rough, but no rot. "I'll give you 40. He nodded. I gave him the cash. I carried the chest back to my house. It was heavy. The wood was thick. I figured I'd clean it up, use it as a coffee table or storage for blankets. Kim was in the kitchen when I brought it in. "What's that?" "Coffee table," I said. I set it down in the living room. $50, but I got it for 40. She walked over and ran her hand over the lid. "It's creepy," she said. "Looks like something you'd find in an old church. It's got character." She shrugged. "We can try it, but if it gives me nightmares, it's going in the garage." That night, we watched TV in the living room. The chest sat in front of the couch. I put my feet up on it. The wood was cool. Around midnight, we went to bed. I woke up at some point in the dark. I didn't know what woke me. I laid there listening. Then I heard it, a scratching sound, coming from the living room. I got up and walked out. The living room was dark. I turned on the floor lamp. The chest was closed. The scratching had stopped. I stood there for a minute. Nothing. I went back to bed.
The next night, the same thing happened. Scratching. I got up, and it stopped. This time, I opened the chest. Empty. I closed it and went back to bed. On the third night, I didn't wait. I sat on the couch with the lights off. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. Scratching, coming from inside the chest. I reached over and put my hand on the lid. The scratching stopped. I felt the lid vibrate, just a little, like something had been moving inside and went still. I opened it. Empty. I started checking the chest every day. I looked for cracks, for gaps. Nothing. The inside was solid wood, but the scratching kept happening. Kim started hearing it too. It's mice, old house. They probably got into it through the bottom. I flipped the chest over. The bottom was solid. No holes, no gaps. I put mouse traps around it anyway. Nothing.
A week later, I was sitting on the couch, reading. Kim was at work. I heard a noise. Not scratching, a thump, like something hitting the inside of the lid. I looked at the chest. The lid was closed. I waited. Another thump, louder. I got up and opened it. Inside there was a shoe, a child's shoe, a dirty sneaker, maybe size 3. I stared at it. I knew it wasn't there before. I reached in and picked it up. It was damp. The laces were tied in a double knot. I checked the chest again. No hidden compartments. Nothing. I threw the shoe in the trash can outside. The next morning, I woke up and went to make coffee. The shoe was on the kitchen counter. The double knot was still tied. I called Kim. "Did you take that shoe out of the trash?" "What shoe?" she said. I hung up. I put the shoe in a plastic bag and drove it to a gas station down the road. I threw it in their dumpster. When I came home, I found the chest open. The lid was up. I hadn't left it open. I walked over to close it. Inside, there was a photograph, a Polaroid, faded. It showed a little girl, maybe 8 years old, brown hair, missing a front tooth. She was sitting on a wooden porch holding a doll. The porch looked like the one on the farmhouse where I bought the chest. I turned the photo over. Written on the back in pencil was a name, Megan. That night, I took the chest out to the garage. I put it in the corner and locked the garage door. I didn't want it in the house. The scratching started in the garage. I could hear it from the living room. Scratching, then thumping. I went out there with a flashlight. The chest was closed. I opened it. Inside was a hairbrush, a child's hairbrush with brown hair in it. I called the cops the next day. A deputy came out. I showed him the chest, the photo, the brush. He took the photo and the brush. He said he'd look into it. He asked where I got the chest. I told him. He went down to the farmhouse. The man with the gray beard was gone. The house was empty. The deputy said it had been abandoned for years. "That can't be right," I said. "I bought this from a guy sitting on the porch." The deputy just looked at me. "Neighbors say nobody's lived there since the 80s. I started digging. I went to the county library. I looked up old newspapers. It took me a couple days, but I found it. A story from 1987. A little girl named Megan Holloway had gone missing from the farmhouse. Her father, Daniel Holloway, was questioned but never charged. The case went cold. I showed Kim. She wanted to get rid of the chest. I wanted to know what was in it. I took the chest out to the backyard. I got a crowbar and a hammer. I pried the lid open. Then I started breaking the inside panels. The chest had a false bottom. When I pulled the wood out, I found a space about 4 inches deep. Inside that space was a mattress, a small, thin mattress, stained. There was a metal cup, a child's coloring book, a doll, and a roll of duct tape. I stood there looking at it. I understood what the chest was. It wasn't for storage. It was for keeping something contained, something small. I called the deputy again. He came out with another cop.
They took the chest, they took the mattress and the other things. They told me they'd reopen the missing person case. I thought it was over. I thought the chest was gone, and that was the end of it.
2 weeks later, I was in the garage, working on a shelf. I heard a car pull into the driveway. I walked out to see who it was. An old pickup truck. The man with the gray beard got out. He looked at me. His eyes were the same pale blue. "You took my chest," he said. "I bought it," I said, "from you." He shook his head. "It's not for sale. I need it back." "The cops have it," I said. I stepped back toward the garage. "They know about Megan." He didn't say anything for a second. Then his face changed. It went from blank to something else, something hard. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. He reached into the bed of his truck. He pulled out a tire iron. He started walking toward me. I ran into the garage and grabbed the first thing I could find, a shovel. I turned around just as he came through the door. He swung the tire iron. I blocked it with the shovel handle. The metal hit the wood. I shoved him back. He was old, but he was strong. He came at me again. I swung the shovel and caught him in the side of the head. He went down. He didn't get up. I stood there holding the shovel, breathing hard. I called 911. The cops came. They took him away. He was still alive, but barely. He died in the hospital 3 days later. They found things in his truck, things I didn't know about. A roll of duct tape, a length of chain, a photograph of another little girl, one they didn't know about, from another town. The cops told me I saved that girl's life. Maybe I did, but that's not what I think about. I think about the chest, about the scratching, about the shoe and the hairbrush and the photo. I think about that little girl, Megan, and what she went through in that box. I think about how long she was in there, how long she scratched. I sold the house. We moved back into town. I don't go to yard sales anymore, not ever. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, scratching. It's not loud, it's just there, in the walls, under the floor. I tell myself it's the house settling. I tell myself it's in my head. But last week, I was cleaning out the closet in our new apartment. Way in the back, behind some boxes, I found a shoe, a child's shoe, size 3, the laces tied in a double knot. I threw it away. I moved the boxes back. I haven't told Kim. I don't know if the scratching will ever stop. I don't know if it's her or if it's something else, something that followed the chest, something that followed me. All I know is, when you buy something at a yard sale, you don't know what you're really buying. You don't know what's inside. You don't know what's watching. And once you bring it home, it's already too late. We moved into the house on a dead-end street in late August. It was a small Cape Cod, white with black shutters, the kind of house you see in every older neighborhood in Massachusetts. The yard was small but fenced in, and that was the main thing for our dog. The inside needed work, wallpaper peeling in the bathroom, creaky floors, a basement that smelled like damp concrete. But the price was right, and my wife, Rachel, fell in love with the fireplace. The previous owners were an older couple. The husband had died about a year before we bought it. The wife moved down to Florida to be with her sister.
The house had been empty for 6 months. The real estate agent said the family had taken most of the stuff, but there might be some things left in the attic in the basement. She said we could keep whatever we found or throw it out. We found junk. Old holiday decorations, broken lamps, a box of cassette tapes. Nothing worth keeping. A week after we moved in, I was driving back from the hardware store and saw a yard sale sign. It was on a telephone pole at the end of our street, a handwritten sign with an arrow pointing down a side road. I had a free afternoon, so I followed it. The yard sale was at a brick ranch house set back from the road. An older woman was sitting in a lawn chair next to a folding table. There were a few boxes on the table and some furniture on the grass. I got out and walked around. Nothing caught my eye until I saw a cardboard box on the ground next to the table. Inside the box were photo albums, 3 of them, big ones with faux leather covers. I picked one up and opened it. Old pictures, vacations, birthday parties, a family I didn't recognize. The photos were from the 70s and 80s, the kind of pictures where everyone is wearing plaid and standing in front of wood-paneled walls. "How much for the albums?" I asked. The woman looked at the box. $5 for all of them. My husband passed. His family left those here years ago. I don't know whose they are. I gave her $5. I figured Rachel might like them for the frames. She was always looking for old frames to repaint. I took them home and put the box on the coffee table. Rachel came in from the kitchen and started flipping through one of the albums. "These are someone's memories," she said. "It feels wrong to just throw them out. We can keep them. Maybe there's a way to find who they belong to." She kept looking through them. After a few minutes, she stopped on a page. "This is our house." I walked over and looked. It was a photo of a family standing in front of a white Cape Cod with black shutters, the same house, our house. The man in the photo was tall, thin, with glasses. The woman was short with curly hair. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, standing in front. That's gotta be the people who lived there before us, before the old couple. Rachel flipped through more pages. There were pictures of the inside of the house, the living room with different furniture, the kitchen with yellow cabinets. There were pictures of the backyard, the same fence but newer. There were pictures of the boy and girl in the yard, a birthday party with a cake shaped like a train. I thought it was kind of cool, honestly, finding the history of the house. I figured we could show the photos to the neighbors, maybe find out who the family was and send them the albums. That night, I was watching TV in the living room. Rachel was in bed. I heard a noise outside, a car door slamming. I looked out the window. A dark sedan was parked across the street. The lights were off. I didn't think much of it. People visiting neighbors.
The next morning, the car was gone. A couple days later, I was in the backyard with the dog. I saw a man standing at the end of the driveway. He was in his 50s, maybe, thin, with gray hair and glasses. He was just standing there, looking at the house. I walked over. "Can I help you?" He looked at me. His eyes were pale. "I used to live here," he said, "a long time ago." "Oh yeah?" I said. "You're the family in the photos?" He tilted his head. "Photos?" "I bought some photo albums at a yard sale. They had pictures of this house. I figured they must belong to the family that lived here before the last owners." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Can I see them?" I hesitated. Something about him felt off, but I figured he just wanted his family pictures back. I told him to wait there. I went inside and grabbed the box of albums. I brought them out and handed them to him. He opened one. He stared at the first page. His hands were shaking. "These are mine. My wife took these." "You want them back?" I said. "You can take them." He closed the album. He looked at me. His face was blank.
"Where did you get them?" he asked. "A yard sale, a few streets over. An older woman, her husband passed." He nodded slowly. He took the box and walked to his car. He got in and drove away. I stood there watching him go. I felt relieved. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, I came home from work and found a note taped to the front door. It was a piece of notebook paper. In pencil, it said, "You have the rest." I didn't know what it meant. I went inside and told Rachel. She said maybe he meant more photos, but I had given him all 3 albums. There was nothing else. That night, I heard noises in the basement. I went down to check. The basement was empty, but on the concrete floor near the old washer, I saw footprints, dusty footprints leading from the basement door to the corner. The door to the basement from outside had a broken lock. I'd been meaning to fix it. I called the police. They came out and looked around. They said there was no sign of forced entry. They told me to fix the lock. I did. I also put a deadbolt on the front door and bought a motion light for the backyard. A week went by. Nothing happened. I started to relax.
Then I was in the attic looking for a box of Christmas decorations. I was moving some old insulation when I found it. A box. A small cardboard box tucked under the eaves. I pulled it out. It was sealed with packing tape. I cut it open. Inside were more photo albums. 4 of them, same kind as the others. I opened the first one. Same family, same house. But these photos were different. The family was younger. The kids were babies. There were pictures of the woman holding a baby. The man was in some of them, but not as many. I opened the second album. The photos were all of the woman. She was in the backyard, in the kitchen, in the living room. The photos were taken from angles that seemed wrong, from outside windows, from doorways. The woman in the photos looked scared. Her smile was tight. Her eyes were looking away from the camera, like she was looking for something. I opened the third album. The photos were of the woman in the house, but she wasn't alone. There was a man in some of them, a different man, tall, thin, with glasses, the man I had given the albums to. In these photos, he was standing behind her, his hands on her shoulders. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. I opened the fourth album. The last page had a photo of the woman. She was sitting on the floor in a room I didn't recognize. Her hands were tied. Her mouth was open. The photo was blurry, like it was taken in a hurry. I closed the album. I put everything back in the box. I went downstairs and called the police again. A detective came. I showed him the albums. He looked through them. His face got serious. "Do you know who this man is?" he asked, pointing at the tall man with glasses. I said, "He came here. He said he used to live here. I gave him 3 albums. He left a note." The detective took the note. He told me not to touch anything else. He called in more officers. They found out who the family was. The woman's name was Denise. The man in the photos with glasses was her husband, a guy named Carl. They had lived in the house in the late 80s. Then Denise disappeared. Carl said she left him, took the kids. There was a police report, but nothing came of it. The case went cold. The detective asked me to describe the man who came to my door. I did. He ran the name. Carl was still alive. He lived about 30 miles away. They went to his house. He wasn't there, but they found things. Photographs. Dozens of them. Photos of Denise. Photos of other women. Photos of houses. Photos of the house I was living in. Recent photos. Taken from the street, from the backyard, from inside the basement. They found my house keys on his kitchen table. I moved out that night. Rachel and I stayed at a hotel. The police put a watch on the house.
They caught Carl 3 days later. He was in the basement again. He had a hammer and a roll of duct tape. He told the police he was looking for the rest of his photos. They found Denise's body in the woods behind the house, buried under leaves and dirt. She'd been there for 30 years. The kids were never found. I sold the house. I didn't care what it cost me. I didn't want to live there. I didn't want to live anywhere near there. But I still think about the photo albums. I think about the woman in the pictures. I think about how she looked at the camera, knowing someone was watching. I think about how I brought those albums into my house, how I gave a stranger my address without even thinking. Sometimes I still find photos, not in albums, just photos. One will show up in a drawer I already checked, or tucked into a book on my shelf, or under the passenger seat of my car. Always a picture of a house, always a picture of a woman, always taken from a window or a doorway. I throw them away. They come back. Last week I found one in my mailbox. It was a picture of my new house, taken from the backyard. The timestamp on the back was from yesterday. I don't know if it's him. He's in prison. I checked. He's still there. So maybe it's not him. Maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's something else. Maybe the photos aren't his anymore. Maybe they belong to her now. And maybe she's still looking for the rest.